I've got a couple of passages that I want to read this morning. They're not huge passages, but they do link together quite well. So the first one is taken from Revelation and chapter 21, the last but one chapter of the Bible. Revelation chapter 21. I'm going old school. I've got the book. I thought I'd remind people that the Bible is a book, and I can still read it, That's quite good, isn't it? So Revelation 21 and just the first 8 verses. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of living water. He who overcomes will inherit all this, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." And then there's an earlier passage in John's Gospel where Jesus is speaking that is very, very similar to this. But I thought, because Revelation is written by John and we've got John's Gospel as well, we can just see how these two passages come together. So John chapter 5 and verse 19 through to verse 30. I can find it. John chapter 5. That doesn't look right to me. Ooh. I'll read it from here because I'm not sure that the reference is correct. But anyway, Jesus gave them this answer. "Truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son does also. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. Yes, and he will show him even greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. But just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives life to whom he is pleased to give it. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honour the Son just as they honour the Father. Whoever does not honour the Son does not honour the Father who sent him. Very truly I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life, and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life. Very truly I tell you, a time is coming and now has come, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself, and has given him authority to judge, because he is the Son of Man. Do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just. For I seek not to please myself, but him who sent me. So as I say, that's two passages, both written by John, both found in the New Testament, speaking about end times. And I want us to remember that the Bible clearly says that the world will end. The world will end. Things will not always be the same. The Bible tells us that today is the time of God's grace, when anyone can repent and be saved. It tells us that God isn't willing that any should perish, that there's the opportunity for all who will to come to God. But we're also warned that that time won't last forever. There's a time coming when grace will end and judgment will come. We are warned to seek God while he may be found and call upon him while he is near. You know, we hear a lot today, don't we, about the fragility of our planet. Things like global warming, the changing of weather patterns, the loss of wildlife and habitat, all those sort of things about impending doom and disaster unless man changes his ways. That the world that we know and love won't exist if we carry on as we are. But you know, our Bible tells us something different, doesn't it? It tells us that the world's not going to end by some natural disaster. It's not going to end even by some human disaster. It's going to end when God brings it to its end at his appointed time. And I think that's important for us to remember. The world is in the hands of God. It's not spiraling out of control. It might seem like that sometimes, especially as we look at the news, but it's in the control, in the hands of God. You know, God created the world. He's the one who sustains and keeps the world, and he will bring our world to its end in his appointed time. And that's really what I want us to think about this morning. I've entitled the talk this morning, In Time. Can we have the first slide, please? In Time. And I was thinking, you know, everything we do is about time, isn't it? I mean, I'm running out of time by looking at that clock. I'm sure it's fast, isn't it? I don't think that's the correct time. But, you know, we sort of organise everything that we do by time. It orders our events. But in this passage, it tells us that time, as we know it, is going to come to an end. A time when heaven and earth will pass away and Jesus will return to judge the world. But we, in our days, live in time. And I just want us to think about a few aspects of time. So can we have the next slide, please? What can we say about time? There you go. I thought I'd provide some amusing sort of graphics. So there you go. We live in time. It never stands still for us. We can't hold it back. It doesn't stop. It doesn't speed up. It doesn't, we can't rewind it. We can't fast forward it, can we? It's a constant that we live in day by day. Sometimes it appears to drag. Sometimes it appears to fly by, doesn't it? But in reality, it's constant. Whatever we're doing, wherever we may be, it makes no difference, does it? We could be in all sorts of parts of the world, but we're governed by the rule of time. You might think it changes as you go through a time zone, but in actual fact, it's all ordered. Time is ordered. The sun rises, the sun sets in the same way every day. Whatever we may be doing, wherever we may be, the hours, the minutes, the days, the months, the years, and so on, continue to roll by. Time rules our lives. You know, we're constantly asking the question, what's the time? Is it time to do this? Time to do that? And so on. We order everything that we do by time, don't we? Time to get up, time to go to school, time to go to work, time for lunch, time to go home, time for tea, so on and so forth. Time to relax, time to go to bed, and then the following morning, it all repeats again, doesn't it? The whole process repeats again the following day. We have the next slide. We can think about time in two ways, either by counting up or by counting down. As I was thinking about this, there's a lot more things that count down than count up. But lots of things count down, don't they? We've got all sorts of devices around us that count down, from our humble kitchen timer that tells us that our meal's about to be ready, to something like the clock for the NASA space rocket. That was counting down recently, wasn't it? But it never got to the correct time, did it? I don't know what time it got stopped at, but it never got back down to zero. So the launch never took place. But they count down to the launch of their next space rocket. This year we had the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. I don't know if you saw that. There was a countdown clock. I think it was in Centenary Square, one of the squares in Birmingham anyway. We were counting down to the start of the Commonwealth Games. I did try to buy a clock, but there were two prices, I didn't bother. You've got to imagine that there's a clock at the front of the church this morning. But at the end of the year, we'll count down to New Year, won't we? That's a big thing that you either stick your telly on or well, it's usually the telly these days. Before we bring in the New Year, we count down to the New Year and so on. There's all sorts of events that happen that we count down to. I put a note here this morning, perhaps you're counting down to the end of the sermon. There you go. And then the other way, what counts up? I struggle with this. The only thing I could think originally that counts up is a stopwatch, because it counts up time, doesn't it? Because you're trying to beat the previous time, you're trying to beat the time, but the time itself is counting up. And then I thought about things like football. Football counts up, doesn't it, to 90 minutes, or these days to 90 plus whatever minutes, because it seems to go on and on sometimes. And yet rugby is the opposite, isn't it? They count down 80 minutes down, isn't it? I don't know why one counts up, one counts down, but somebody obviously thought that was a good idea. But in things like athletics and motorsports, the time counts up, where people are always trying to beat a previous score, a previous lap time, and so on and so forth. And then I was thinking that when you're younger, you're perhaps always counting up, aren't you? I don't know whether the younger ones here think like that, but you know, when you're younger, you're looking forward to the time when you're able to do things. You know, when will I be able to go to school, to university? When will I be able to vote, to drink alcohol, to drive, to get a car, and so on and so forth? When will I be old enough to do this, that, and the other? And then I was thinking, as we get older, it's a bit the other way around, isn't it? Where we're sort of counting down, looking back, and thinking, when I was this age, I was still able to do this, that, and the other. You know, I was still able to run however far we think we could do. You know, things that we were able to do and we took for granted, we can't do anymore because age has taken that away from us. And then events. You know, we look forward to things like birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, holidays, and so on, don't we? And yet there's other events in time that we dread, maybe things like a visit to the dentist, to the doctors, to hospital, times of sickness, times of bereavement, times of bad news, things that we would rather forget. You know, some things in time we're able to plan in great detail, aren't we? You know, some people plan their weddings years in advance, don't they? So that every detail is going to be perfect and done correctly. But other things, they come out of the blue and we just can't make any preparation for them whatsoever. You know, we're just going to knock back by them because we don't have time to take them in. And you know, all these things happen in our lives. And we can't really do that much about them, but they happen. And how we handle them sort of shapes our lives, doesn't it? It makes us the people that we are. Next slide, please. Time is beyond our control. However hard we try, we can't hold it in our hands and make it do what we want. You know, we might try to do that, but it just doesn't work like that, does it? It's just like trying to hold sand in your hand. You can't. It just slips through your fingers, a bit like the hourglass. It just trickles away. And I was thinking back, you know, I don't know, you know, I'm getting on a bit now, so you tend to look back a bit more, don't you? Well, I do anyway. Perhaps you don't. But you look back at your life and think, well, would I have done things differently? What would I have changed? What would I have done if I had the opportunity to go back and do it again? Maybe what things would we have chosen not to say in a particular circumstance? Or maybe we would have said something in a circumstance, but we missed the opportunity to do so. There's a lot of things that perhaps if we look back, we might choose to change. It made me, because I was thinking about this quite a while ago, it made me think about what Andy said when he was back the other week when he was talking about Lot's wife, wasn't he? And the fact that she looked back. And he said that it can be good to look back in certain circumstances, but if we hold on too tightly to the past, it can become a burden to us, can't it? And some people's lives, are destroyed because they can't let go of something that's happened in the past. But time is beyond our control. We need to learn to let go of the past and look to the future. The next slide, please. The Bible says that there will come a time when time as we know it will end. That's what we read in the passage a little bit earlier, isn't it? In Revelation it says this, "But then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." And then in verse 4 it says, "For the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne," that's God, "said, I am making everything new." And yet I was thinking about our lives. We don't sort of think in that sort of way, do we? We live our lives as if nothing's ever going to change, don't we? Well, that's how I live anyway. I expect tomorrow to be the same as today. I expect to go to sleep in the evening, to wake up in the morning. I expect the sun to come up, to rise in the morning and to set at the end of the day. I expect to be able to be well enough to go about my daily business. I expect to have air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, clothes to wear, homes to live in. We expect warmth, security, safety, and so on, don't we? We just expect those sort of things. We plan each day as though it's always going to be the same and it's never going to change. We expect our lives to be ordered and measured, reliable, dependable, repeatable. Next slide, please. And yet, we live in very uncertain times, don't we? We live in very uncertain times. And if I was thinking, if anything, uncertainty seems to be increasing, doesn't it? But it does if you listen to the news. I've come to the point where quite often now I just turn it off because I'm just fed up with it. But it does seem as if uncertainty is increasing. And I was thinking, just of the sort of changes that we've seen, even in the last 5 years. Amongst other things, we've seen a rise in Islamic extremism, and as a result, great instability in the world, haven't we? We've even had terrorism on our streets in the UK, haven't we? And at the moment in the news, we've got the Manchester bombing, haven't we? And all that went on there. Things that you wouldn't have expected to have happened in our country in previous times. We've been through Brexit and all that's involved. Well, some people say it's still going on, and it's not come to an end quite yet, but it's still got ramifications to the country today. We've all gone through COVID. We wouldn't have expected to have to go through that, would we? With your lockdowns, your wearing of masks, your restrictions on where you can go, things that you can do, even people that you can meet. Who would have thought that we would have to have put up with that? We've experienced the death of the Queen, haven't we? I think that's the monarch that people thought would live on forever, if you listen to some people on the news. But her reign has come to an end. And then there seems to have been countless sort of scandals that have gone on in the news, all sorts of things and people involved in that. And now, of course, we have war in Europe, don't we? We have Russia invaded Ukraine and all the destruction and issues that are coming out of that war. It's led to things like the fuel crisis, hasn't it? To the food crisis, and that's led to the cost of living crisis and so on. And it seems to have caused chaos in the government, and various prime ministers, chancellors and so on have moved on, haven't they, in the last few days. And you might ask, where will it all end? Where will it all end? I'm sure I could have put a whole load of other things in that little passage. So many things that have gone on, so many changes that we've had to go through over the last 5 years. Next slide, please. So the question is, in uncertain times, where do we turn In uncertain times, where do we turn? I was thinking about this. In the past, great changes to our nation have often brought our nation closer to God. There's the story I'm sure most of us have heard about in the Second World War when the king called the nation together for prayer. In 1940, there was the case where UK and Allied forces were trapped on the beaches of the French coasts because the Germans had forced them into retreat. And there was the possibility that all of them might have been wiped out because there was nowhere for them to go. So a plan was put into place to send out a fleet of boats, small and large, to go and rescue them. Apparently, Churchill informed the king that perhaps only 20 to 30,000 people would have been rescued on that particular day. So in a response to that, the king called upon the nation to pray. He called for a national day of prayer. And apparently hundreds of thousands of people responded to that call. And as a result of that, over 300,000 people were rescued from the beaches of northern France. 300,000, that's 10 times the number that Churchill had expected to be able to be rescued. They were able to return home, and apparently the seas were extremely calm. It was unusual at that particular time of year. Usually they were quite stormy, but everybody was able to come home in safety. Some people say that because of that event, it changed the outcome of the war. What prayer can do. In the past, great changes have brought the nation closer to God. So I ask again, in uncertain times, where do we turn? Where do we turn? In the past, revivals have sprung up, usually out of difficult times where people have prayed. And here and now, our nation is going through some momentous changes, isn't it? And I think there has been some calls for prayer. There have been people that have called for prayer. But as far as I know, there hasn't been any great movement of people back into our churches. In fact, if anything, particularly things like COVID seems to have brought a decline in many churches. I know a lot of churches have closed, haven't they, because the number of people meeting has become fewer and fewer. And it reminded me that we should be praying for God to intervene into our nation and into our world today. In all these circumstances, we should be turning to God. We should be bringing all these situations to God in prayer. I put down in the notes, sometimes I wonder what it'll take for people to return to God today. What more has got to happen for that to occur? It seems to me that people will turn anywhere else other than to God. They'll look everywhere else first, won't they? I don't know whether you sort of found that to be the case in your own situation. People will look at some bonkers things rather than look to God. And yet in life, most people crave stability. There was a survey done that apparently there's a small percentage of the population that like risk and change, but the bulk of the people prefer stability in their lives. They don't work, they don't live well in a world that's constantly changing. And it reminded me of Psalm 121. It's one of the psalms that they used to sing when they were going up to Jerusalem at the time of the feasts. It says this, it says, I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you, nor the sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your comings and going both now and forevermore. And I was thinking, why does he say that the psalmist is looking up into the mountains? He's not staring into space looking for inspiration. You might think that, why is he just looking into the mountains? It's not like you used to do at school where you stood, you stared out the window. You were thinking hard, weren't you? But really you were daydreaming. Looking for some sort of inspiration because you didn't really know where to turn, or you weren't perhaps interested in what was going on. The psalmist was particularly looking to the mountain because they were on the journey to Jerusalem, which was at the top of the mountain. It was their goal, their destination. He was looking to the God of Israel, the God who created heaven and earth, the only place of real help. And we too can look to that same God today. In him alone we find true stability in our lives. Revelation reminds us that he alone stands out of time, doesn't he? He knows the beginning and the end. He is eternal. He is the Alpha. He is the Omega. He is the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So this morning I encourage us all in our uncertain times to turn to him. There's no one else like him. For all our daily needs, for all our spiritual needs, let us turn to him. Acts 4 verse 12 says this: salvation is found in no one else. There's no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. I've got a bit more to do, but I'm going to finish there this morning. I'll tell you what, we'll just go through the slides. So the next slide, please. What if we knew when our world was going to end? What I thought about this, we used to have that signpost on the front that said, Jesus, it's his millennium. I thought, well, you've got to imagine this because the Bible clearly says that we don't know when the world's going to end. But imagine if on the front of the church there was, Jesus is returning in X years, X days, X months, and so on. And there was a countdown clock on the front of the church. How would that change our church? How would it change the neighbourhood? I put in the notes, I think it would depend on how far away it was. I wonder how near it would have to be to make us change. Next slide, please. And then what if we knew exactly when our lives were going to end? Some people have these sort of experiences where something's happened in their life, they're almost died, and they've seen the white dot, as it were, and they've been pulled back, and they come back and they say, I'm going to change this, that, and the other, because I've been given a second chance. What if we had that opportunity? What things would we want to change in our own lives and experiences? And then the next slide. Jesus knew exactly, didn't he, when his life was going to end. We've taken communion this morning. And the whole purpose of Jesus coming to this earth was the cross, wasn't it? He knew the destination. He knew why he came and what he had to do. And yet he chose to do it. He still chose to come and to do that on our behalf. Next slide, please. We don't know the times, do we? We can't say what's going to happen tomorrow. But Jesus does. Our times are in his hands. Let us learn to commit our lives to him and trust our God with our lives. Final slide, please. In his time. In his time. Our times are in God's hands. Now is the time of grace. Now is the day of salvation. There's opportunity for all to come to God and be saved. A reminder again that a time of judgment will come, that it's not going to stay like that forever. Will we be ready for Christ to come again? May we all commit our lives to his care and his keeping. Thank you.